Keanu Reeves had always lived with a certain stillness inside him, a quiet space that people often misunderstood. Many believed he carried silence because of shyness, while others assumed he simply did not need to speak much. But the truth was softer and far more human. He carried silence the way other people carried secrets, and that silence had grown deeper over the years because he had learned that the world did not always know how to hold fragile things gently. He had learned that sometimes the best way to protect the heart was by choosing which part of it never reached the surface. Sandra Bullock was different. She walked into any room like she carried sunlight on her shoulders. Her laugh had a warmth that softened even the hardest conversations, and she had an ability to make people feel seen and safe. She was not loud, but she was present, and that presence made people feel like nothing was impossible. She had a resilience in her that did not come from perfection, but from surviving her own storms and choosing kindness anyway. There was a courage in the way she showed up in the world, and there was tenderness in the way she looked at others when she believed no one was watching. People often said they were opposites, but anyone who spent more than 10 minutes with them knew the truth. They were two different kinds of quiet, and those quiets recognized each other. Sometimes it happens that way. Two people do not need to speak the same language of confidence or charm, but they can share the same language of gentleness, of sincerity, of understanding. And when two hearts speak that language, even silence feels like a conversation. Their story did not begin with fireworks. It began with a very normal day on the set of a film they were making early in their careers. Everyone on the crew remembered it as an uncomplicated time filled with long hours, shared meals, hard work, and an easy kind of laughter that comes from people who trust each other. The set was busy and loud, filled with cameras, cables, scripts, and people moving from one task to another. Yet in the middle of that noise stood Keanu, who acted with a quiet focus, and Sandra, who moved with her usual mix of professionalism and warmth. In those early days, neither of them understood how much they would eventually mean to each other. They simply knew that something about their connection felt natural. There was no push, no pull, no forced excitement. It was calm, genuine, and rooted in a shared respect that grew without trying. Every day added one more thread to a connection that felt effortless. Keanu noticed things about Sandra that most people dismissed as small details. He noticed the way her eyes softened whenever she listened to someone. He noticed the way she remembered small facts about the crew and how she would check on people when she sensed they were tired. He noticed the way she gave kindness as if it cost her nothing, even though the world had not always been kind to her. He admired that. He admired it more than he ever admitted out loud. There was something brave about how she moved through life with an open heart. Sandra noticed things too. She noticed the stillness around Keanu and how it was not cold but thoughtful. She noticed how he treated every person with the same level of respect, whether they were a producer or an assistant carrying equipment in the heat. She noticed how he never tried to stand above others even when he easily could have. She noticed how he listened more than he spoke, and how every time he did speak, his words felt honest. She noticed the way he would step aside quietly to give someone else more space, or how he would wait patiently when someone looked overwhelmed. There was something gentle about him, something steady, and she admired that more deeply than she expected. Their scenes together were effortless, almost too natural. Directors would watch the monitors and whisper about their chemistry, and crew members exchanged knowing smiles because there was a softness between them that could not be staged. Sandra and Keanu made simple moments look meaningful. They made silence feel like a conversation. They made two characters feel alive in a way that audiences would remember for decades. Yet off camera, something quieter was happening, something real, something they never named because naming it would have changed everything. Every day on set felt like a slow unwrapping of who they were beneath the surface. They learned each other through small gestures, through shared glances, through the space between their sentences. Sometimes the deepest connections form not in loud declarations, but in gentle noticing. They moved through their days with an unspoken understanding that neither of them fully recognized until much later. The first moment that stayed with Sandra for years happened during a break between scenes. The crew was resetting the cameras, adjusting the lighting, and preparing for a complicated shot. Most actors walked off to rest or review lines, but Sandra stayed near the edge of the set, holding a cup of tea and watching the controlled chaos with relaxed curiosity. Keanu walked over quietly, without drawing attention. He did not ask if she was cold, but he noticed that she was gently rubbing her arms. He did not ask if she wanted anything, but he saw her teacup was almost empty. Without a word, he walked away for a moment. When he returned, he handed her a fresh cup of warm tea. He did not make it dramatic or charming. He did not highlight the gesture. He simply offered it with a quiet sincerity that felt deeper than it appeared. Sandra never forgot that moment, not because of the tea, but because of the way he gave it. He did it as if caring for someone was the most natural thing in the world. Keanu never forgot the way she looked up when he handed it to her. He never forgot the soft surprise in her eyes or the quiet thank you she spoke with a sincerity that made his chest tighten in a way he did not expect. These were small moments, but small moments build large truths. The more time they spent together, the more they understood each other in ways that felt instinctive rather than learned. They laughed easily, talked gently, and moved around each other with a rhythm that felt natural. But beneath all of it lived a quiet ache, a quiet possibility, a quiet something they both felt but never discussed. Neither of them believed the other felt anything more than friendship, and in that misunderstanding lived the heart of their story. Keanu kept his feelings inside because he believed she was far beyond anything he deserved. He admired her so deeply that he felt unworthy of disrupting her life with his emotions. He convinced himself that admiring her quietly was kinder than risking disappointment. And because he always believed that kindness mattered more than desire, he chose silence. Sandra kept her feelings inside because she believed he saw her only as a friend and colleague. She admired him too much to risk unsettling whatever they already had. She valued trust more than she valued possibility, and she feared that speaking her feelings would disrupt the gentle ease they shared. So she chose silence too. Two hearts, one silence. The world moved on around them. Years passed, projects shifted. Other films came and life changed in ways neither of them expected. They built careers, they built friendships. They experienced heartbreaks and triumphs, losses and victories. But no matter how far they traveled in life, they carried something unspoken in the corners of their memory, something that belonged only to them. And every time the world brought them back into the same room, that unspoken truth stirred. Their connection never faded, it simply waited. One night many years later, during a small private event at a quiet studio space, something unexpected happened. It was a reunion for a group of people who had worked on one of their early films. Old friends, old crew members, and a few familiar faces filled the room with warm nostalgia. The atmosphere was filled with stories, laughter, and memories that resurfaced like old photographs found in a forgotten drawer. Keanu arrived quietly, greeting people with a humble nod and a gentle smile. He stood near the corner for a moment, observing the room with the same thoughtful calm that had always defined him. Sandra arrived a little later, and when she stepped through the doorway, something inside him shifted. She looked almost exactly the same, yet more grounded, more confident, more full of life. Time had softened her edges but strengthened her presence. She spotted him almost immediately. Her smile widened in a way she did not even try to hide, and she walked toward him as if no years had passed at all. Their hug was warm, familiar, and far too long for two people who had nothing unspoken between them. But something was unspoken, and the hug revealed it. They spent most of the evening talking, not about work or fame or the usual topics people expect celebrities to talk about. They spoke about life, about lessons, about resilience, about kindness, about the moments that had shaped them quietly over the years, not the moments the world had seen. And then something subtle shifted. Someone asked a simple question, directed toward Sandra. "What was your favorite memory from working with Keanu?" She began answering with a smile, ready to share a funny or charming story. But then she paused. Her eyes softened, and a silence filled the room just long enough for everyone to feel the weight of it. She said something gentle and honest, something she had never said so openly before. She said she had always admired the way Keanu treated people, the way he moved through the world with kindness that felt real. She said his actions had stayed with her long after the cameras stopped. She said that knowing him had made her feel safe during a time in her life when she needed gentleness more than she knew. Keanu froze. The room softened. And just as Sandra was about to continue, just as she was about to say something that would change everything between them, someone interrupted to make an announcement for dessert. Laughter filled the room again. Conversation shifted. The moment slipped away before it could finish revealing itself. But Keanu felt something new forming inside him, something dangerously close to hope. Sandra felt something too. Something warm, something quiet, something that reminded her of how she used to look at him years ago. They both tried to pretend the moment had not happened, but pretending became harder with every passing minute. Later that night, when most guests had left and the staff was quietly cleaning the last of the tables, Sandra stepped outside to get some air. The evening breeze was soft, and the dim lights of the studio courtyard created a peaceful glow. She stood near the small fountain in the center, listening to the gentle sound of water, feeling a strange mixture of peace and longing. Keanu stepped outside a few minutes later, not knowing she was there. When he saw her, he hesitated, unsure if he should join her or leave her with her thoughts. But she turned and smiled at him, and the hesitation dissolved. They stood side by side in the quiet night, saying nothing for several seconds. The air around them felt charged with all the words they had never spoken. Then, without looking directly at him, Sandra asked a question she had carried silently for years. She asked why he never told her what he really felt back then. Keanu froze again, but for a different reason this time. He had no idea she knew. He had no idea she sensed anything. He had no idea she had felt anything similar. He swallowed slowly, unsure of how to answer. When he finally found his voice, it came out softer than he expected. He said he never wanted to complicate her life. He said he respected her too much to risk misunderstanding. He said he valued her happiness more than he valued his own hopes. Sandra felt her breath catch. But before she could respond, before she could say the words building inside her chest, the moment was interrupted again. This time by a staff member stepping outside to lock the courtyard gate and inform them that the event area was closing for the night. Keanu stepped back, Sandra stepped forward, and the moment slipped away once more. But what she was about to say, what she almost confessed, was something he had spent half a lifetime hoping to hear. That unfinished truth will finally begin to surface, but not in the way either of them expects. The night of the reunion stayed alive in both their minds long after the guests had gone home. Sandra drove back to her house with quiet music playing in the background, but she barely heard any of it. She kept replaying the courtyard moment again and again, feeling the weight of everything she did not get the chance to say. It was strange how silence could feel heavier than words, and that night, the silence seemed to follow her all the way inside her home. She placed her keys on the counter, took a deep breath, and walked into the living room where her dog greeted her with happy eyes. She smiled gently while petting him, but her thoughts were somewhere else entirely. She wondered how life might have been different if she had spoken years ago, and she wondered what would have happened if the courtyard moment had not been interrupted. Keanu, on the other hand, walked home in the quiet of a late evening. He did not turn on any lights when he entered his place. He simply stood near the doorway, closed his eyes, and let the memory of Sandra's voice fill his mind. He could still hear the way she spoke about him earlier that night. It was warm and sincere and filled with a softness he was not used to receiving. It made him feel seen in a way he had forgotten was possible. He walked deeper into the room and sat down on the couch, elbows resting on his knees, hands pressed together as he tried to make sense of the emotions swirling inside him. It had been so long since he allowed hope to enter his heart, and he did not know what to do with it now. For the next few days, their lives went back to their usual work schedules, yet something inside them had shifted. They moved through meetings, scripts, interviews, and responsibilities, but there was an invisible string pulling at their thoughts. Sandra found herself smiling unexpectedly at random moments, usually when she remembered how surprised he looked when she asked why he never told her how he felt. His face in that moment stayed with her, and she realized that she had always underestimated how deeply he cared. She wondered if she should reach out, but she hesitated. She did not want to make assumptions. She did not want to complicate anything. Yet she also did not want to lose the chance to finally speak the truth she had carried for so long. Keanu found himself pausing during small moments, like when he brewed coffee in the morning or read through scripts in the afternoon. He would catch himself thinking about how her eyes softened when she listened, or how her smile lit up even the simplest conversations. He remembered the warmth in her voice when she talked about kindness and resilience, and how she believed people could still choose goodness even after experiencing pain. He admired that about her. He admired everything about her. Yet he still hesitated to reach out because he feared misunderstanding. He feared ruining the quiet trust between them. He feared bringing his feelings into her world again without knowing if she truly wanted them there. But fate has a way of intervening when people hesitate too long. One afternoon, Sandra received a call from an old director they had both worked with. He was planning a new project and wanted both of them to consider joining. He said it was early, just a developing script, but he felt they would be perfect for the roles. He told her he had already spoken to Keanu earlier that morning and that Keanu seemed interested in reading the early drafts. When Sandra heard that, something inside her stirred again. The idea of working with him after all these years felt almost too meaningful, like life was offering her a second chance at a moment she once let slip away. She agreed to meet the director the following week to read through the first parts of the script. When Keanu heard that Sandra had accepted the invitation too, he felt something warm spread through him. It felt like relief mixed with excitement, and a tiny spark of hope he could not ignore. He had not expected life to place them in the same creative space again, not after so many years of drifting in different directions. He felt grateful for the opportunity, even if he did not fully understand what it meant yet. The day of the script meeting arrived. It was held in a quiet studio room with tall windows that let in soft afternoon light. The director placed printed pages on the table and welcomed them with warm smiles and nostalgic enthusiasm. Sandra arrived first, wearing a calm expression but feeling her heartbeat in her chest. She looked around the room and felt a strange peace settle over her. She knew Keanu would walk in soon, and the idea made her stomach flutter in ways she had not felt since she was much younger. Keanu entered the room a few minutes later. He stepped inside with his usual humble presence and greeted her with a gentle smile that reached his eyes. She returned the smile, and something in the air shifted again, just like the night of the reunion. Their seating positions at the table placed them side by side, close enough for their elbows to almost touch. The proximity felt familiar and comforting, like it belonged there. They exchanged small words at first, polite and warm, but beneath those words lived a deeper truth that neither of them had touched yet. The director began talking about the concept of the new film, explaining the emotional arc, the themes, the tone, and the deeper layers of the story. But while he spoke, Keanu felt his awareness drifting toward the presence beside him. He could sense Sandra's calm breathing, her thoughtful stillness, her quiet attention as she listened carefully to every detail. He wondered if she noticed his subtle glances. He wondered if she felt the same familiar tension that lived between them like a shadow they had ignored for too long. Sandra, too, felt her attention split. She listened to the director, yes, but she also sensed the stillness in Keanu's posture, the kindness in his presence, and the warmth that always surrounded him like an invisible envelope. She remembered the courtyard moment again. She remembered how vulnerable he had sounded when he told her he did not want to complicate her life. She remembered how her heart reacted to that honesty. And she wondered why, after all these years, he still did not see how worthy he was of being chosen, not avoided. After the meeting ended, the director stepped out to take a call, leaving them alone in the room. The silence between them felt thick with unspoken history. Sandra looked at the script pages in front of her, then lifted her eyes toward him. Her heartbeat quickened. She wanted to speak. She wanted to say something real and honest. She wanted to answer the question that had been left incomplete in the courtyard. She wanted to tell him what she had almost said. But before she could form the words, Keanu looked at her with a softness she had rarely seen. He asked if she was all right. He asked if the script felt overwhelming. He asked if she wanted a minute to breathe. The way he asked revealed everything about him. Even now, after all these years, his priority was still her comfort. She shook her head gently and smiled. She said she was all right. Then she took a quiet breath, preparing to finally speak the truth she had kept inside for far too long. She looked at him fully now, not hiding behind polite conversation or cautious smiles. Her voice softened as she said she had not been finished that night. She said she had more to tell him. She said she had carried something for years that she had never dared to show. Keanu felt his breath catch. Something inside him shifted with a mixture of hope and fear. He asked what she wanted to say. His voice was soft but steady. His eyes held a vulnerability he rarely let anyone see. Just as she opened her mouth to speak, just as the truth was about to break free from years of quiet hiding, someone knocked on the door and entered without waiting for a response. It was an assistant from the studio, delivering updated documents and asking them to sign paperwork before leaving. The timing was painfully familiar. Another moment broken. Another truth paused. Another feeling left hanging in the space between heartbeats. Sandra closed her mouth and lowered her eyes, the opportunity slipping away again. Keanu thanked the assistant with his usual kindness and accepted the documents, though his chest felt tight with disappointment. Later, as they walked out of the studio together, the sky began to shift. Clouds rolled in slowly, heavy and gray, and the air grew cooler. They stopped near the parking lot entrance where their paths naturally separated. She looked at him, trying once more to recover the moment. He looked at her, waiting for whatever she wanted to share. But then her phone rang. It was a call she could not ignore. She answered, apologizing with her eyes before stepping aside to speak. He waited for a moment, but he could tell the call would take longer than a few seconds. He felt the old hesitation return. He did not want to pressure her. He did not want to create weight she did not need. So he walked toward his motorcycle, gave one last gentle glance, and rode away. When Sandra ended her call and looked back toward where he had been standing, she realized he was gone. A quiet ache spread through her chest. She whispered to herself that she would try again next time. She promised herself that she would not let fear or timing silence her again. She told herself that the next moment would not slip away. But fate had its own plans, and the next time life brought them together, something unexpected happened. Something neither of them saw coming. Something that would force both of them to confront the truth they had been avoiding. And in part 3, that unexpected shift will change everything they thought they understood. About timing, about unspoken truth, and about what they truly meant to each other. The following week moved slowly for both of them, yet each day carried a quiet anticipation. Sandra felt it in the way she lingered near her phone, waiting for a message that never came. She felt it in the way her thoughts drifted whenever she sat alone, replaying every unfinished moment between them. She knew she needed to speak to him again. She knew she needed to say the words she had swallowed too many times. But she also knew that the next time she tried, she wanted no interruptions, no sudden distractions, no unexpected arrivals. She wanted the moment to belong to the truth alone, not to timing or fate. Keanu felt a similar pull. He moved through his routine with a gentle restlessness he tried to hide from himself. He woke early, exercised, read scripts, worked on personal projects, and still found himself drifting into memories of her voice in the courtyard and her almost confession during the script meeting. He wondered what she wanted to say. He wondered what she had carried all those years. He wondered if he deserved to even ask. The answers stayed out of reach, and the uncertainty stayed alive inside him like a candle refusing to go out. 3 days after the meeting, the director called them again. He wanted them to attend an early rehearsal session to test chemistry and emotional rhythm for the film. When Sandra heard the request, she felt a small wave of nerves and excitement. Working with Keanu again meant more chances for the truth to finally surface. But it also meant risking the comfort of their friendship. She wondered if she was ready. She wondered if he was. Still, she agreed. Keanu agreed too. His voice was calm and warm when he spoke to the director, but afterward he paused in the quiet of his home and let the truth settle within him. He had been gifted too many near moments, too many almost confessions, too many silences filled with meaning. He told himself that if another opportunity came, he would not run from it. He would not let fear make decisions for him again. He would listen. He would be honest. He would show her that he valued truth as much as kindness. The rehearsal was scheduled on a Wednesday afternoon. The studio room reserved for them was larger than the one they had used for the script read. Tall ceilings, warm lights, and wide, polished floors gave the space a gentle echo. There was no large crew, no noise, no distractions, only a small team of assistants and a few technical coordinators preparing the environment. Sandra arrived first again. She wore a soft sweater and comfortable jeans, looking peaceful yet thoughtful. She walked around the room slowly, running her fingers along the back of a chair, observing the empty space where emotional scenes would eventually unfold. She breathed deeply, trying to steady the flutter in her chest. She kept reminding herself that she would not let the truth slip away again. When Keanu entered the room, he spotted her immediately. His expression softened. He walked toward her with a quiet smile that carried the warmth of a shared history. She smiled back, and in that smile lived 1,000 unsaid things. They greeted each other gently, with the comfortable ease that always surrounded them, but beneath their words lived a deeper tension they both felt but did not name. The rehearsal began with simple exercises. The director asked them to walk through early character interactions, focusing on timing and emotional presence rather than memorized lines. Their movements were natural, their expressions sincere, and the room seemed to recognize the chemistry that lived between them. Their connection was effortless. The director praised them repeatedly. The assistants exchanged quiet smiles, sensing something deeper than acting. As they continued, Sandra found herself watching Keanu not as a co-actor, but as someone she wanted to speak honestly with. Every time he looked at her during a scene, her heart nudged her to say the truth. Every time he listened with full presence, she felt the weight of the years between them. She wanted to pause everything. She wanted to step out of the script and back into their unfinished story. Keanu felt the same. Each moment beside her felt like a reminder of everything he had buried. He watched the way she moved, the way her expressions softened during emotional beats, the way she listened with her whole heart. He admired her more now than he did years ago, and that admiration made every moment heavier. The rehearsal ended early because the director had another engagement. He thanked them, complimented their natural partnership, and left them alone in that wide, quiet room with soft lights and gentle echoes. This time, neither of them moved toward the door. Sandra stood still, looking at him with a nervous courage growing inside her. She told herself silently that this was the moment. She reminded herself of all the missed chances. She rehearsed the first few words in her mind. She knew she would speak, even if her voice shook. Keanu watched her, sensing something shifting again. He could feel a quiet storm forming in the space between them, a storm made of long-held truths. He stepped a little closer, not enough to pressure her, but enough to show he was ready for whatever she wanted to say. She took a slow breath, then another, then she opened her mouth. And finally, after all the interruptions, after all the years, she said the first real words. She told him she did feel something back then. She told him she had admired him more than she ever admitted. She told him she had carried those feelings quietly because she believed he did not want anything more than friendship. Her voice trembled slightly, but her eyes stayed steady. She told him she had been afraid of misreading him. She told him she respected him too much to risk hurting their bond. She told him she wished she had been braver. Keanu did not move for several seconds. The world seemed to fall silent around them. His breath caught in his chest as her words slowly settled into him. He had imagined this truth for years, dreamed of it even, but hearing it out loud felt unreal. His throat tightened, and his voice struggled to form even a single word. He asked her why she thought he never felt anything. She answered softly. She said he always seemed distant not by choice but by nature. She said he carried silence like a shield. She said she never wanted to disturb the peace he created around himself. She said he felt untouchable sometimes, not because he was cold, but because he was gentle in a way that made her afraid to break anything. His eyes softened, and for the first time he let her see the vulnerability he had kept hidden for years. He whispered that he had cared for her too, more than he believed he had the right to. He said he kept his distance because he respected her happiness more than he trusted his own feelings. He said he stayed silent because he believed she deserved someone more confident, someone who would not hesitate the way he always did. Their truths met in the quiet air between them, two halves of a story finally coming together. The moment was fragile, tender, overwhelming. Sandra stepped closer. He did not step back. Their breathing synchronized without effort, and the world outside that room seemed to disappear entirely. She whispered that they wasted years. He whispered that he never stopped wondering. And then, just as the moment reached its peak, just as honesty wrapped around them with the power of something long overdue, the door to the rehearsal room opened. Only this time the interruption was not gentle, it was not casual. A coordinator rushed in, out of breath, holding a phone in her hand with panic in her eyes. She apologized quickly and said she had been told to find them immediately. She said there had been an emergency involving someone connected to Sandra. She said it was urgent. Sandra felt her stomach drop. Her heartbeat stumbled. Her hands trembled before she even knew what had happened. She reached for the phone, listened to the voice on the other end, and her expression changed instantly. Fear entered her eyes, deep and real. Keanu stepped closer instinctively, ready to steady her if she needed it. When she ended the call, she whispered something that made the room spin for him. She said someone important to her had been taken to the hospital unexpectedly. She said she needed to leave right away. She said she did not know how serious it was. And then she whispered something even softer. She said she was scared. Keanu felt a protective instinct surge through him. He told her he would go with her. She did not argue. She nodded with quiet desperation. And as they rushed out of the studio together, neither of them realized that this emergency, this sudden terrifying moment, would reveal a truth even deeper than the feelings they had just confessed. And in part 4, Life will force their hearts to face something far more powerful than fear, than timing, or than silence. The ride to the hospital felt longer than any distance they had ever traveled before. Sandra sat in the passenger seat with trembling hands and unfocused eyes, trying to steady her breath as the city lights flickered past the windows. Keanu drove with a calm intensity, gripping the wheel yet constantly glancing toward her to make sure she was all right. Every red light felt too long, every slow car ahead felt like an obstacle placed by fate, and every turn felt like an eternity stretching between fear and hope. Sandra kept telling herself to stay calm, but her mind spun in circles. She kept picturing the person she cared about lying in a hospital room, surrounded by doctors and uncertainty. She felt guilt, fear, and helplessness tightening around her chest. For a moment she closed her eyes and leaned her head back, whispering quiet thoughts she did not want anyone else to hear. But Keanu heard the softness in her breathing, and he understood the silent panic hidden beneath it. When they arrived at the hospital, Sandra did not hesitate. She stepped out quickly and rushed toward the entrance with Keanu close behind her. The lobby lights were bright and cold, and the air carried a quiet stillness that felt heavy. She approached the reception desk, gave the name she had been told, and waited anxiously as the nurse checked the system. Every second felt longer than the one before. When the nurse finally pointed them toward the emergency wing, Sandra nodded quickly and walked away without another word. Keanu followed her, watching the way her shoulders tightened, the way her steps wavered slightly, the way she hugged herself as if trying to hold her fear in place. He wanted to comfort her, but he did not want to invade her space. Still, his presence remained steady beside her, a quiet reassurance. When they reached the waiting area, Sandra saw a doctor exit a room and she hurried toward him. The doctor recognized the name she gave and guided them to a private corner where he began explaining what had happened. The news was not catastrophic, but it was serious enough to demand immediate treatment. The person had collapsed due to an unexpected medical complication, and though the doctors were optimistic, the next hours would be critical. The moment Sandra heard the words "next hours will be important," her knees almost gave out. She lowered herself onto a chair and buried her hands in her face. Fear washed over her, stronger and deeper than she expected. Keanu knelt beside her, resting one hand near her but not touching her until he saw her shoulders shake. When she finally looked up, her eyes were filled with tears she could no longer hide. She whispered that she was terrified. Keanu leaned closer, keeping his voice gentle and calm. He told her he was there, that she did not have to go through this alone, that she did not have to pretend to be strong. His eyes held a depth of sincerity that softened her trembling. She looked at him with a vulnerability she rarely showed. She took a shaking breath, and in that moment she allowed herself to lean slightly toward him. He caught her gently and held her while she cried, not with dramatic intensity, but with a quiet acceptance that told her she was safe. They stayed like that for several minutes, wrapped in a silence that held more honesty than words could offer. When she finally pulled back, her eyes were still wet but steadier. She apologized softly, but Keanu shook his head gently and told her she never needed to apologize for feeling something real. The waiting area grew quieter as the night deepened. Nurses walked past with measured steps. The soft sounds of machines echoed faintly from nearby rooms, and the air held a cold stillness that settled into their bones. Sandra sat beside him, hugging her arms, while Keanu remained close enough for her to feel his presence, but far enough to give her space when she needed it. After a long stretch of silence, she finally spoke. Her voice was fragile but more honest than before. She said she hated feeling powerless. She said she worried about the people she cared for because life had taught her that nothing was guaranteed. She said she tried to be strong, tried to be hopeful, but some nights felt impossible to carry alone. Keanu listened with full attention. He told her it was human to feel this way. He told her she did not need to carry anything alone. He told her she had been strong for others her whole life, and it was all right to collapse sometimes. Her eyes softened as she listened to him. Her heart absorbed every word. Then slowly, almost subconsciously, she shifted closer. Their shoulders touched lightly. She did not move away. Neither did he. The clock on the wall continued ticking as the minutes unfolded into long hours. Sometime after midnight, the doctor returned with better news. The condition was stabilizing. The danger was not gone, but the improvement was significant enough to ease the tension in the air. Sandra exhaled in a shaky wave of relief, her eyes closing for a moment as she absorbed the doctor's words. When the doctor left, she felt her body relax for the first time that night. She leaned her head on Keanu's shoulder without hesitation. He did not move, not even a little. He simply accepted her weight and let her rest. The quiet warmth of that gesture settled into something deeper. After a long silence, Sandra spoke again, her voice low and emotional. She said she almost lost someone she loved, and all she could think about during the drive was how little control she had. She said it reminded her of moments from her past that she never fully healed from. She said she sometimes feared how fragile life could be. Keanu listened quietly. He understood fragility better than most people. He understood loss, fear, and the painful edges of vulnerability. He turned slightly toward her, speaking softly as he told her that fear did not make her weak. He said fear only existed when something mattered. He said the depth of her fear was proof of how deeply she loved, how deeply she cared, and how deeply she connected to the world. Her eyes glistened again. She whispered that she did not want to run from life, but sometimes she felt like life kept running from her. She said she wanted to hold on to the people who mattered, but she feared she would either lose them or push them away. Keanu hesitated, then asked gently if that fear included him. The question caught her breath. She lifted her head and looked at him, her eyes wide and vulnerable. She knew what he meant. She knew he was asking if she had held herself back because she feared losing him. She wanted to answer. She wanted to say yes. She wanted to admit that her silence had been shaped not by indifference but by fear of breaking something precious. But before she could answer, a nurse approached them and said the patient was awake and ready for a short visit. The moment broke again. Sandra stood quickly, wiping her face and steadying herself. She thanked the nurse and walked with her down the hall, but before entering the room, she turned back to Keanu. She held his gaze for several long seconds, her expression soft and heavy with meaning. She whispered a quiet thank you, not for the ride or the support, but for the way he stayed, the way he listened, the way he caught her when she nearly fell apart. Keanu nodded gently, but inside he felt something stronger than relief, something deeper than hope, something he had kept buried for far too long. When she disappeared into the hospital room, Keanu sat back down in the waiting area. The night felt colder. The silence felt heavier. He knew they were closer to the truth now than they had ever been. But he also sensed something else, something he could not explain yet, something that made his heart tighten. When Sandra returned 20 minutes later, her face was calmer. She sat beside him again, closer than before. She told him the situation was improving. He smiled softly and said he was glad. And then, without planning to, without thinking too hard, she whispered something quiet but life-changing. She said she realized tonight that she was tired of holding back. She said fear had taken too much from her already. She said she wanted to stop running from her own heart. Keanu felt something inside him unfold slowly. But before he could respond, before he could speak the truth rising inside his chest, her phone buzzed again. She checked it quickly, expecting another update. But her expression changed. Her eyes widened. Her breath caught. She whispered something that made his entire body tense. She said something was wrong again. And this time, the danger was worse, and far more unexpected than the first call. And in part 5, the night will take a turn that tests both their hearts and reveals which truth cannot be delayed any longer. Sandra stared at her phone with wide, frightened eyes as the message loaded on the screen. Her breath hitched so sharply that Keanu stood instantly, stepping closer with concern tightening his expression. The hallway around them felt suddenly colder, quieter, heavier. The earlier relief vanished as if it had never existed. She pressed a hand to her chest, trying to steady the panic rising inside her, but her fingers shook uncontrollably. Keanu asked what had happened. His voice was calm but urgent, steady but filled with worry. She tried to speak, but the words caught in her throat. For a moment, she simply held the phone out to him, unable to form a full sentence. When he took the phone, he read the message carefully. It was from the hospital team. The patient had lost consciousness again. Complications had returned. The doctors were preparing for immediate intervention. Sandra felt her knees weaken, but Keanu caught her elbow gently, keeping her steady. She whispered that she could not lose them. Her voice cracked in a way that shook something deep inside him. He whispered back that she was not alone, that he was right there, that he would stay no matter what happened. His words were steady, but his own heart was pounding. A nurse appeared and asked Sandra to follow her quickly. They hurried down the hallway, passing rows of doors and the quiet buzz of machines. Sandra's steps were fast but unsteady, and every few seconds she glanced nervously toward the room they were approaching. When they entered the small consultation area outside the procedure room, a doctor stepped forward to explain the situation. His voice was gentle but serious. The condition had shifted. They were doing everything they could. The next hour would be critical. Sandra listened with wide eyes, nodding but barely absorbing anything. Her breathing was shallow. Her hands trembled. Keanu stood beside her, just close enough that she could lean slightly into him when her strength faltered. She did not ask for support, but she allowed herself to receive it, which in her world meant she was truly frightened. When the doctor walked away, she released a shaky breath. She lowered herself into a chair in the quiet consultation corner and covered her face with her hands. Her shoulders trembled. She tried to stay silent, but a soft sound escaped her, a sound filled with fear she had tried to outrun for years. Keanu lowered himself into the chair beside her and gently placed his hand near hers on the armrest. He did not touch her directly yet, giving her the space to reach for him if she needed it. She did. Her hand moved slowly but deliberately, sliding into his with a fragile desperation. Their fingers intertwined naturally, as if they had been waiting for that moment since the first day they met. The warmth of his hand steadied her. He squeezed gently, not too tight, just enough to let her know that he was fully there. Minutes passed in a heavy quiet. Sandra stared ahead with unfocused eyes as memories flashed through her mind. She remembered childhood fears she never talked about, moments of loss she never healed from, and nights when she sat alone trying to convince herself she was strong enough. She whispered that she hated hospitals. She whispered that they reminded her of painful times she never discussed publicly. Her voice softened even more as she admitted she had always feared nights like this. She said she feared losing the people she loved, because once she lost someone, the ache stayed forever. Keanu listened, his heart twisting with every word. He wanted to protect her from everything she had ever feared, but he knew that some fears were woven into the past and could only be softened, not erased. He leaned closer and told her she did not have to be strong right now. He told her she had spent her whole life caring for others, and it was all right to let someone care for her. She looked at him, and her eyes softened with a depth of gratitude he had never seen from her before. The waiting dragged on. The hospital lights flickered softly. The clock on the wall ticked with painful slowness. Nurses moved through the hall with calm urgency. The air smelled faintly of disinfectant and cold metal. Sandra rested her head on Keanu's shoulder, and he placed his cheek lightly against her hair, breathing in the quiet presence of the woman he had admired for half a lifetime. The longer they waited, the more she opened up, not about the patient, but about herself. Fear has a way of unlocking truths that silence holds too tightly. She told him she had spent years building emotional walls she never fully understood. She told him she used to believe vulnerability meant weakness, and that pain made her defensive even when she did not want it to. She told him she sometimes pushed people away when she needed them most because she feared burdening them. Then she whispered something that struck him deeply. She said she had pushed him away too. Keanu inhaled quietly, his heart tightened. He asked her why. She looked at him with tired but honest eyes. She said she did not push him away because she did not care. She pushed him away because she cared too much. She said she feared that wanting him would make her lose him. She said she feared that loving someone quietly was safer than risking the truth. Her voice cracked when she admitted that every time she felt the urge to confess what she felt, she convinced herself he deserved someone who was not as scared as she was. Her confession hit him with a force he had not expected. It felt like the final piece of a puzzle he had been trying to assemble for years. He felt his eyes sting, not with tears, but with the weight of everything he had kept inside. He whispered that he had never felt pushed away. He whispered that he had only felt unworthy. He told her that her strength had always intimidated him because he feared he could never offer enough. He told her that he had stayed quiet because he believed silence was safer for her life, not because he lacked feelings. She blinked slowly, absorbing every word. He lifted their joined hands slightly and told her he was not going anywhere. She exhaled a long, trembling breath. Her eyes softened. She leaned her forehead lightly against his shoulder again and whispered that she did not want to run anymore. The air between them shifted. It grew warmer, heavier, more fragile. They had broken through years of silence in the span of one painful night. But fate was still not finished. After what felt like an eternity, a doctor stepped out of the procedure room. Keanu stood up immediately, and Sandra followed, her entire body tense. The doctor approached them with a cautious expression. He explained that the procedure had been more complicated than expected. The patient was stable for now, but needed to remain under close observation. There was no guarantee of how the next hours would unfold. Sandra felt relief and anxiety collide at the same time. She thanked the doctor, then sank back into her chair. Exhaustion took over her entire body. Keanu placed a hand gently on her back, rubbing slow circles to help her breathe through the emotional crash. After a long moment, she lifted her head and looked at him with a tired softness. She said she wanted to step outside for some air. He nodded and followed her through the quiet hallways until they reached the small garden area behind the hospital. The night air was cold but soothing. The sky was dim with clouds, and the garden lights glowed faintly against the dark path. She stood under a tree, wrapping her arms around herself. Keanu approached slowly, giving her space. She looked at him, then at the sky, then back at him. Her voice was quiet when she finally spoke. She said she could not pretend anymore. She said the fear she felt tonight had reminded her how unpredictable life could be. She said she did not want to leave important words unspoken again. Keanu stepped closer, his heartbeat steady but strong. He told her he felt the same. He told her he had spent too many years hiding behind caution. He told her he did not want fear to control the rest of his life. Their eyes locked, soft and honest. She whispered his name softly, as if speaking it for the first time. He reached out slowly, giving her every chance to pull back. She did not move. She stepped closer. Their hands met again, fingers intertwining naturally, and the warmth of that touch filled the cold night. She whispered that she was ready to tell him everything. He whispered that he wanted to hear everything. But before she could speak, before the final truth could finally break free, a nurse rushed out into the garden calling her name urgently. The patient had taken a sudden turn again. This time it was worse. Much worse. And the moment Sandra heard those words, her face drained of color. She let go of his hand, and everything shifted again. The nurse's voice echoed through the small garden area, sharp and urgent, cutting through the fragile stillness that had wrapped around them. Sandra froze the moment she heard her name. Fear washed over her so quickly that she forgot she had been holding Keanu's hand only seconds earlier. She stepped forward, her heartbeat pounding loudly in her ears, her breath trembling, her mind overwhelmed with the worst possibilities. Keanu followed close behind, staying near enough to steady her if she faltered, but far enough not to crowd her racing thoughts. The nurse guided them quickly through the hallways. Sandra's steps were fast but uneven, and the closer they came to the room, the more her entire body trembled. Every memory of past heartbreak rose inside her, mixing with the fear of losing someone important again. She whispered small prayers she had not spoken in years. She asked for strength, even though she felt none. Keanu watched her with quiet agony, wishing he could lift the fear out of her chest and carry it himself. When they reached the room, a doctor stepped out just long enough to explain the situation. There had been a sudden complication. The patient was still alive, but their condition was extremely unstable. They were doing everything they could. They would fight as long as necessary, but the outcome was uncertain. The words "uncertain outcome" felt like knives inside Sandra's chest. She felt her breath shorten, her vision blurred for a moment. Keanu placed his hand gently on her back, steadying her before she collapsed under the weight of her fear. She leaned into him, not thinking, only reacting from instinct. His presence became the anchor she needed. They could not go into the room while the medical team worked, so they were asked to wait in the hallway. This hallway felt colder than the others. The lights buzzed faintly. The air smelled strongly of antiseptic. Nurses rushed back and forth with tense expressions. Sandra sat down on the bench outside the room, her elbows resting on her knees and her head falling into her hands. Keanu sat beside her, his heart twisting at the sight of her pain. Minutes passed, then more minutes, stretching into a slow, unbearable eternity. Sandra whispered that she was terrified. She whispered that she did not know how to lose someone again. She whispered that she did not know if she had the strength to face another heartbreak. Her voice was small, fragile, and filled with the raw vulnerability she had hidden from the world for years. Keanu leaned closer, speaking softly. He told her she was not alone. He told her no matter how the night unfolded, he would stay with her. He told her he would not let her fall apart alone. She looked at him with red eyes, her lips trembling, and for a moment she allowed herself to believe in the comfort he offered. The door opened suddenly. The doctor stepped out with a tired expression, but there was a glimpse of relief in his eyes. He told them the crisis had passed. The patient was stable again, though still weak and still needing careful monitoring. He said they had fought hard, and for now, things were moving in the right direction. Sandra released a breath that sounded like a quiet sob. Her shoulders dropped as the fear drained from her, leaving exhaustion in its place. Keanu placed a hand on her back, rubbing gently in slow circles. She leaned into him again, letting her tears fall freely because this time they were tears of relief. After a few minutes, the doctor allowed her to enter the room for a brief visit. Keanu stayed behind in the hallway, giving her privacy but remaining close enough to be there the moment she stepped out. He watched her through the small window, saw the way she approached the bed with soft, trembling steps, saw the relief in her face when she heard their voice, even if weak. He felt a quiet warmth inside him, seeing her love and compassion so clearly. When she finally walked out, she looked drained but calmer. She walked straight to him and without hesitation wrapped her arms around him. He held her gently, letting her rest in his embrace. Neither of them said anything. They did not need to. Silence had finally become a comfort instead of a barrier. They stepped out of the hospital as the first hints of morning appeared in the sky. The world outside was quiet, painted in faint blue and soft gray. The air was cold but refreshing. Sandra inhaled deeply, trying to ground herself after the emotional storm of the night. Keanu walked beside her, his presence steady and warm. They found a small bench near the hospital garden. Sandra sat first, then Keanu. She looked at him for a long moment, searching his face as if she were seeing him clearly for the first time. Her voice was soft, filled with a tired honesty. She said tonight had changed her. She said she had realized how easily life could shift without warning. She said she no longer wanted to waste years hiding from the truth she felt. Keanu listened quietly, his heart thudding softly in his chest. She turned her body toward him, her eyes deep with meaning. She told him she had feelings for him for a long time. She said she admired him from the beginning. She said she valued his kindness, his humility, his patience, and the gentle way he moved through the world. She said she had hidden her feelings because fear had convinced her she would regret speaking them. But tonight had shown her that she would regret silence far more. Keanu lowered his gaze for a moment, swallowing emotions he had been carrying silently for years. When he lifted his eyes again, they were filled with a depth of sincerity she had never seen so clearly. He took a slow breath and told her he felt the same. He said he had admired her for years. He said she had been in his thoughts more often than she ever knew. He said he kept his distance because he believed she deserved stability and confidence he did not always feel he possessed. He said he feared that his quiet nature would burden her. She moved closer, shaking her head gently. She whispered that his quiet nature was what she admired most. She said she did not want someone louder than life. She wanted someone honest, someone authentic, someone who made her feel safe without trying to impress her, someone like him. The early morning breeze brushed past them, carrying the first warm hint of sunrise. Keanu reached for her hand slowly, giving her a chance to pull away. She did not. She pressed her fingers into his gently, holding on as if she were finally ready to stop hiding. They sat there in the quiet dawn, holding hands, letting the moment breathe. No grand declarations, no dramatic speeches, just two hearts finally admitting what they had spent years denying. Sandra whispered that she was ready for whatever came next. Keanu whispered that he would walk beside her every step. Not as a dream, not as a memory, not as an almost, but as something real, something honest, something they had both earned through patience, resilience, and quiet love. The sun slowly rose, casting golden light across the hospital grounds. Sandra leaned her head on his shoulder. Keanu rested his cheek lightly against her hair. The world around them softened into early morning calm. And for the first time in their long shared history, their hearts were no longer silent. Their truth was no longer hidden, and their future no longer shaped by fear. It was shaped by choice, by honesty, and by a quiet love neither of them would ever underestimate again.